Hi, my name's Jack and I'm the founder of Azide Performance. And in this video, we're going to have a look at an example report from the SprintVision system. And basically, I'm just going to give my analysis on this particular, in this case, acceleration rep, and use the SprintVision system's analytics in combination with my own opinion to basically diagnose, in this video it's myself, so diagnose my own sprinting issues during this particular rep and try and extract insights about what I can improve on and what I should be focusing on during acceleration to improve my performance. So I made previous videos describing what this system is, what the SprintVision tool is, what these different buttons here on the side are, what the whole basically platform allows you to do. And then I made a different video basically describing all of the different insights that can be looked at when you get a piece of video footage processed by the SprintVision system. So if you're interested in those, I would say that those are introductory videos. You can go and watch those. In this, I'm going to be analyzing the sprint report and talking more so about what's actually going on in this rep and what the athlete could improve. So basically, I just took a video of myself accelerating like this. You can see my phone on the tripod here in the shadow, but this is what the video looks like. And I've used the SprintVision system to basically generate a bunch of analytics about this particular rep, and I'm going to analyze them there. So, okay, the video footage tab doesn't really tell us too much. It just shows us the kind of overlaid landmarks on top of the athlete's body as they progress through the sprint. Of course, we could scroll through this and kind of add our own analysis here, but instead the first thing I'm going to do is go to the analytics tab. So also I noticed that I got a pretty decent score, although my technique wasn't so great, elasticity, so. So let's go have a look at the analytics. So first thing I notice here is that we're looking at the ground contact times, and we've got a ground contact time of 200 milliseconds. Now, that's not so great. I mean, it's okay, but for step one, I would usually expect, at least for myself, slightly lower ground contact times. If you look at elite sprinters, they're hitting about 175, so it's not terrible, but I would expect a little bit lower here. So maybe a little bit lower for step one. But the real problem I'm seeing here is an increase in ground contact time, a huge increase of 50 milliseconds. So during acceleration, we expect to see a consistent decrease in ground contact times, right? If you have good acceleration form, you'd expect to see your ground contact time for each step decrease. And step one being the highest ground contact time step of your whole sprint, even during a 100-meter sprint, for example. Step one should always be the highest. So because we have this increase here, the system has added a warning icon for step two, and we can click on that to find out some more details. So it basically says, as I was saying, that ground contact time should ideally decrease gradually over your acceleration. This decrease is indicative of optimal running form. So potential reasons for the increase include overstriding or inefficient foot strike, and so on and so forth. So with some other signs that there might be overstriding is a significant increase in shin angle between step one and two, a decrease in stride frequency between step one and two. So those are some other things to look at. So how could we tell if this is overstriding? So, I mean, kind of a experienced coach, or maybe not so experienced coach as well, will be able to tell just by looking at this. This is quite overstriding, but we can also look at, for example, some other metrics here to determine this. So for example, the initiation shin angles, this is a huge increase in shin angle. So basically what that means is just, if we look at the angle of this shin upon ground contact here, we've got quite a horizontal shin, right? We've got a pretty good angle here, 33 degrees roughly. If we look at the elite comparison on initiation shin angles, we're actually doing very well here. We're actually a little bit more horizontal than the elite athletes. But that doesn't really help us too much because on step two, our shin suddenly becomes extremely vertical here. So we've got a very, very vertical shin on step two. You can see it's like, what is it? 70 degrees, way out in front of our body. And vertical shin angles means we're going to be directing a lot of force initially in the vertical direction. We're going to have to wait for our center of mass to move over our shin before we can start really trying to push in the horizontal direction. And again, we've got a warning sign on the shin angle graph as well, telling us that there was an increase in shin angle between step one and two, and then a decrease, usually during optimal, or if an athlete has optimal acceleration technique, we'd see a gradual increase. So for example, from this to this, then a little bit up, then a little bit more up. And if you were to see that, that would be a positive sign. But because we've got this warning here as well, again, it's very indicative of overstriding, which basically means, if you're not familiar, that the athlete's just striking too far forward, which is not allowing us to properly direct force in the backwards horizontal direction. And therefore it's slowing us down. So if we go to the technique analysis tab, a really good thing to look at when we're trying to figure out if we're overstriding is these annotated images, which basically show our foot strike's position relative to our center of mass. So step one's pretty good. We can see that we're striking behind the center of mass with pretty good shin angle here. I would like to see that the knees are a little bit closer together. That's a good sign. Generally, if you see that upon ground strike, the knees are relatively close together, that indicates that we've got good leg recovery and that we're going to be able to get our second step down quite quickly. It's not that bad. We've also got the knee distance here. So you can see the knee distance is kind of peaking in this second step as well, which also indicates overstriding. But not to get ahead of myself here, let's go back to the foot strike tab. And look at that. Step two, we've got the ground strike position here, right at the front of the foot, the forefoot, and its position relative to the center of mass. It's well in front of the center of mass, way too far out in front. And so that really does confirm that we've got overstriding here. And the knee distance also signals this pattern. So really the biggest issue here is with step two. And how could we fix this? Well, I would say that the forward lean can sometimes be a bit of a problem here. Sometimes athletes feel as though they really need to stay low. They really need to lean forward to kind of, mimic the biomechanics of elite sprinters. But sometimes leaning forward can actually be counterproductive if it's causing you to basically stumble forward and therefore put your feet well in front of your center of mass, creating these braking forces and not allowing you to apply horizontal force immediately when you hit the ground. Another thing is this kind of knee joint here. So if you find that your knee is really opening up, right, you're not really activating your hamstrings and striking backwards, and that you're kind of extending at the knee joint too much, then that can also be a problem. So if we go to the kinegram analysis here, we can really see that as we progress through step one and we're preparing for step two, around here, I would like to see this angle maintained, right? So it's a little bit less than 90 degrees, and here just immediately strike back. But if we look at the next kind of frame in the kinegram analysis, we can see that the leg is actually swinging out and we're actually really opening up here, and that's causing us to land with this horrible position, quite frankly. I mean, the knee distance is huge, well in front of the center of mass, and so we've got huge problems here on step two. So those are two things I would say to myself. Not leaning as far forward potentially, but really I think it's more about not letting this knee open up and really practicing striking back down whilst keeping this angle here less than 90 degrees. I would say that's the biggest problem. I mean, we can look further and we can look at steps 3 and 4 here, but maybe go to the technique tab here, look at steps 3. I mean, it's kind of hard to recover. When you're in this position already, it's going to be hard to pick up optimal mechanics for the subsequent steps. I can see I'm continuing to overstride here. I mean, it's not as bad, and here it's definitely getting better. My distance between foot strike position and center of mass is decreasing, but certainly it would be much better if I just had better mechanics for step 2. I think that would set me up for a much better mid and late acceleration rather than trying to analyze the issues here. The issue really stems from step 2 with this huge overstriding. And so I do have some other instances of doing this better. Like I have maybe like this is a good example. All right, so this is another report where I had a much better technique score, much better elasticity score, which usually go hand in hand, by the way. If you have overstriding, you're going to spend much more time on the ground. You're going to have much longer ground contact times, and subsequently your elasticity score is going to be quite low, which elasticity score is really referring to your reactive strength and your ability to react to the ground and have low ground contact times. However, that's going to be very low. The score is going to be very low, that is, if you are overstriding and spending a lot of time on the ground. Whereas here, you can see my foot position, foot strike position is much better. If we go to the technique analysis tab, you can see step 1, Not as good, but still pretty good. I mean, generally for step one, you want to be quite a bit behind your center of mass. I mean, I think it's technically in front here, but roughly the same, but really we want to see quite behind. But step two's much better. I mean, much better relative to the last one. There's still room for improvement. The knee distance could be better. The distance from the center of mass could be improved as well, even striking further behind the center of mass, but it's much better improvement here. And if we go to the analytics tab, we can see that there is a consistent decrease in ground contact times, which is as expected. 200 milliseconds, as I said, I think that's a bit high for me. For the first step, I did say that this first step could be improved. So probably from this report, I would take away that the first step really should be much more behind the center of mass, but step two is certainly a lot better. And if we look at initiation shin angles, I've actually got an award here because the system has recognized that my shin angles have consistently increased. We haven't had this unnatural increase and then decrease. Or a dramatic jump, right? Like we saw in the last one from like 34 degrees to like 70 degrees, which is like almost doubling of the shin angle, which we shouldn't see. So I've got an award here. It's basically just said the athlete's shin angles consistently increase over the first 4 steps, which is good. And so this acceleration was much better. Around here, okay, maybe I'm starting to strike in front of the center of mass, but in the mid to late acceleration phases, this is somewhat inevitable as the athlete starts to transition to top speed. So this is a much better example. So that's just a sample analysis that I would do on one of these reports, how I would kind of diagnose overstriding during acceleration. And if you're interested in learning about what all this analysis is, what other things are available, like the data overview, you can check a previous video where I basically talk about what each tab exactly gives you and the type of data that is provided to you upon having your video analysis analyzed. So in the next video, I'm basically going to cover this little thing down here. When something goes wrong with the analysis, the option that will allow you to manually correct it and have the report recalculated with the correct values in the case that you see following an automatic calculation of your report, you see that there are maybe some issues in there, you can have that corrected and have the report automatically recalculated within a couple minutes. So if you're interested in learning about that, you can check out the next video. If you have any questions, you can contact me at contact@azideperformance.com, and thank you for watching.